Wie könnte eine Welt aussehen, wo jeder Mensch sich selbstbestimmt bilden kann? Wie müsste Bildung aussehen, dass die Menschenrechte von jungen Menschen geachtet werden bezüglich ihrer Bildung? In meinem Podcast unterhalte ich mich mit Menschen über selbstbestimmte Bildung.
My guest today is Hickmott. I'm very excited talking to you. You are kind of an expert in learning to read or in dyslexia and helping people with problems with that. And maybe you can describe a little bit who you are and what you actually do.
I used to be a corporate person and then I became self-employed 22 years ago. And I started a business called Empowering Learning because I discovered that people who are good at literacy see words as mental images in their imagination. And I had never seen a word in my life. And if I would have been younger, I'd have probably been diagnosed dyslexic. But I wasn't, they didn't have it in my day. I'm too old for diagnosis. And so, anyway, I discovered this little trick and I went around asking my friends who are on the same conference as me, can you do that? And they said, the people who are good at literacy said, yeah, of course we can. We do that all the time. And the others were looking as blank as I was. So my story was I went into my local special needs school on the Monday morning and said, have you got anybody who can't spell here? Because I think I've just learned something really useful. And so I went and worked with them, and I honestly couldn't believe what I could achieve. In a matter of a few weeks, 15 minutes a week for just a few weeks, I got these kids who were in special needs, who had no written language at all, spelling and reading. And so that was the start of the whole journey. And ever since then, I've been coaching individuals. I've been teaching teachers in schools when I can get schools to be interested. I've been working with local groups, and it started off as just dyslexia, and now it's moved on to ADHD and some parts of autism as well. Because the very important fact is that all of these things are affected by mental imagery. That's the pictures you hold in your head. It's not the pictures you're shown, it's the pictures you have in your head. And there is a special place in your brain where you keep all your pictures. So if I say to you, think of an elephant, you'll go to that special place in your brain where you have pictures of elephants, and then you'll describe your elephant. And that's your mental image. It can be a grey elephant with big ears, that's the normal thing. But if you're 4 years old, you'll find you end up talking about rainbow-coloured elephants doing ninja dancing because they're very creative and that's what they enjoy doing. So you have to, and everybody has got or had mental images. We're at 4 years old, NASA reckons on a piece of research that's on the internet, reckons that 98% of small children are creative geniuses. And if you've got a small child, you will know that they are a creative genius. The only problem is as they go up through school, they tend to lose it because we don't further develop their creativity. And along with creativity goes problem solving, putting things together, all sorts of things that are visual skills. So that's where I got to. And today I've trained loads of people. So I have a network of people around the world who can do this. And about a month ago, I suddenly woke up in the morning and went, I could go on for the rest of my life working with individuals who've got dyslexia and helping them improve their experience. But what I really want to do is to stop it happening. So I went backwards and did a bit of reverse engineering and went, if we did this with 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds before they go to school, then I think we would improve their experience in school. Because a lot of people in the UK who are being taught English phonetically really, really struggle, because English isn't a perfectly phonetic language. If you've been born Italian and you speak Italian, then fine, it's a perfectly phonetic language. But English isn't. French isn't a lot better. I don't know where German is. I forgot to look that one up.
Also not really good.
And so we have to have mental images as well as phonics. And how I describe it now is the first thing to do with a child is to enable them to start picturing things in their head. So when you read them a story, you can just ask them to create pictures in their head of the story. And then when you get to the end of the story, you can ask them questions about the pictures they've got in their head. And nobody asks children this question, in my experience. And then we can start helping them absorb words, which would be great, so that when they have to do phonics, which the UK government insists, and it's spreading like wildfire across Europe and America, when they come to do phonics, they've already got, for example, a picture of cat, and now they can stick cat into it as the phonemes.
Why is that it is spreading? Like, because like as you describe it, that doesn't seem to be a very good strategy working with phonics.
No, it isn't. And nobody will believe, because there is this huge paradigm over phonics, if you think about it. There's loads of resources, loads of books, loads of training courses, loads of people, and we're exporting it. Nikolai on Sunday was talking about the fact they are doing it more and more in Germany. And so, but nobody, and it's like, well, 10% of the population can't do it. Isn't that unbelievably bad? There was a woman on a conference I was at recently who was the education minister in Sweden. And she said, the curriculum's wrong. She said, for however long I have got at this job, and I don't think it was very long because they changed government soon after that, she said, I will be changing the curriculum. We have a curriculum that isn't accessible to 10% of the population. This is criminal. So we have to do something with this curriculum. And I think I've come up with the best way I can think of doing it. And also it goes in with the self-directed learning, because we're 3 and 4 year olds, we're not teaching them how to do it. We're letting them absorb and create mental images in their head. And we're letting them absorb words without testing them.
Yes. I guess like the only thing in my experience, most young children are interested in hearing like stories, and that you read to them and that you tell them stories. But like, this isn't really like actually already starting to read with them. It's more like a preparation, what you're talking.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why it's in my map of the world, it's the 3 to 4 year olds, because they're not, it's before they have to do phonics in school, which is 4 to 5 year olds. I mean, I would love, I have to be honest, mental imagery to be taught at the same time as phonics in parallel. But the government decree is that you have to teach phonics only. So the teachers in school aren't allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's always baffling to me, like how these policies come about, because sometimes it feels like they are actually actively trying to create more problems for students. It's like kind of the same with like when I look at self-directed education, it works so much better for young children because it actually takes into account their needs, their emotional needs, their like the very natural way of, it's a very natural way of learning. And then there comes all this stuff, like all this, ideas, ideologies that are put onto that. And then they are kind of forced all the time to do something that oftentimes isn't natural at all for them. It doesn't come easy.
I love the self-directed learning map of the world, but I can't see how it's going to become the norm in the UK, because there is a lot of parents who are taking their kids out of school and they're using the self-directed model. But there is also so many kids in school, I mean, that it's just going to be really difficult to change it. But my philosophy on the really young children, the 3 and 4 year olds, is it is self-directed. And when they move into reception, it would be lovely if they could keep that self-direction, but it may well not be true. I have a little online program called Scaffolding for Easy Literacy, and that explains how we because if you think about it, all children are really visual. They've got brilliant pictures in their head. So all we're doing is asking them to talk about their pictures, which is great as long as they can speak. Then we move them on to seeing words in their pictures, which is not a difficult migration. So you're all the time scaffolding their strengths into what they can then add as additional learning.
How is the situation actually in the UK? Because, like, for example, I'm from Luxembourg, and the idea about like childcare is more and more, it gets institutionalized. So they they start at 3 months old already to get to that parents give them away into institutions. And this has, in my opinion, really, really bad consequences. How is it in the UK? Because I guess like you reach mostly parents with this idea, or do you reach also these institutions?
I've got, I think, 3 nurseries who I'm trying to get to take on this. So it's not very many. And those one of them is just a freestanding nursery. One of them is, and the other 2 both belong to schools. So they have in those schools from much younger to 11 years old. So, yes, I mean, the standard of childcare, I think, is very mixed in the UK, and some of it's really good and some of it is not so good. I think they're trying to teach phonics. Some people are trying to teach phonics in nursery, which is much too early. Then, I mean, I listen to people talking about phonics and I go, I don't know how you understand this. You know, it's like, and how you're going to understand this at 4 years old is beyond me. But that's what they're doing. And of course, another thing is that we don't have a very good system for enabling parents to go back to work and with childcare. That's another problem in life.
Yeah, that's true. And it's, I find it a bit like, it's a bit sad that all the policies tend to be like, we need like more, childcare services and stuff like that, like nurseries and however you want to call it. So parents will get back to work, and this seems to be the idea. And in my mind, that's not such a good thing for the development of young people.
And of course, all this creativity that they've got when they're 4 years old, that we want them to keep and improve upon as they get older, is not getting improved upon. That's why this statistic has gone from 2%, from 98% to 2%. And what we want them to do is keep those creative, imaginative, problem-solving skills, which business is crying out for.
Yeah, and then there comes something along like phonics only that would tell you like, no, there's only one solution to a problem, and then of course you will shut down all your creativity, because why? It is not it is not asked of you, and maybe you are even punished for it because you want to do something different. And then you are diagnosed with all sorts of stuff. Like also, I would say that ADHD, that's not really an illness. It's like a result of you asking something from young people that is absolutely not natural. It's not really healthy in my mind to have to be quiet and sit at a desk for all these long hours. And then, of course, you will create like these symptoms, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinion on that?
Well, on ADHD, they have amazing mental images. I don't know whether they have mental images for words or not, but they have amazing mental images. So if the poor teacher has got an ADHD child in class, and they're always called, their middle name is Distraction. So she's talking about the Eiffel Tower. They've then gone into the centre of Paris. Now they're on the Cross Channel ferry, and now they've gone to a football match in London. So she's still talking about the Eiffel Tower, and they're at a football match in London. And it's all being driven by their amazing mental imagery. And that is a phenomenal skill. But of course, in school, it's just observed as being distraction. Can't pay attention to anything. Yeah. And every ADHD person ought to be checked for their mental imagery, regardless of all the tests that are done for them on diagnosis. Just check their mental imagery and teach them how to get it under control when they want to. You don't want them to have it under control all the time, which is what drugs do. You want them to be able to, when they're trying to focus, know how to get their mental imagery under control. But when they want to be creative, it can fly around all over the place.
Yeah. So you would describe it as, it's kind of a talent, but sometimes it can get in the way of focusing. Or
it's a super talent, and the only problem is it can be quite out of control. And it can actually be, if you imagine loads and loads of pictures going on in your head simultaneously, then you'll think it's actually quite painful after a bit, because you don't know what you're doing. You can wake up in the middle of the night and all this stuff is going on and you don't know how to stop it. So you can't sleep and you get stuff like that. But ADHDers there is mental imagery is the biggest problem. And the second thing is teaching them how to control it. I have a friend in America who's the only person I've met who can do this, who when he has amazing mental images, and he described them to me as they're going past like a newsreel all the time, all day long. So I said, how do you ever get that lot under control? And he went, with difficulty. And I said, well, can I tell you my tip, which is about getting grounded and feeling fully in your body? And 2 minutes later, he went, oh, that's great. I've got one picture has now come out. It's much bigger. It's in much better color, and I can see it properly. So that's what you can do with them.
It's really interesting. I guess it's like I tend to be more auditive. So that's probably also why I chose music as a career. Yeah. I also like doing a podcast or something like that. I really like talking with people and listening to stuff. But that also, it creates, if I hear you now describing that, that creates also images. It's kind of sometimes when I wrote music pieces and then and discussed this with a friend or with a fellow musician where we work together, to describe what do I want to do here? What is the meaning? Then oftentimes we talked in imagery. We talked about but that now we are flying over a mountain and this is how I wanted to feel. And then this image actually helped creating that piece of music.
And there is a very simple test you can do, and I can do it with you. instantly. The minute you're talking about pictures, you're looking up. Your eyes flash up to look at the pictures, and then they come back down again. So try that in a mirror one day. It's just fascinating because your visual pictures are up here. When your eyes go sideways, you're in sounds. And when your eyes go down, which is the worst thing for struggling children, is you're in your emotions, or you're in your internal dialogue, which is telling you, I'm stupid, I can't do this. So at all costs is get children out of their emotions and internal dialogue. I have children, for example, who can't write on a piece of paper on a table, and I stick the piece of paper on the wall and they can write because they're out of their emotions. When they're writing on the table, they just feel they're stupid, can't do this, and want to give up.
Yeah, also sometimes I made the experience that some people like to move around, and for them that's better. To me, for example, too, it depends what you do. And I guess like having the freedom to explore that and finding out how, and then maybe have some information about strategies of other people that you can then adapt and try out is really, really helpful and much better than telling someone this is the only way and you have to do it like that. And if you fall into the 10% that can't do it, then you have a huge problem.
And I do think the problems get worse as you get older, because it starts off as spelling and reading. And then if you listen to the stories of people who've got dyslexia as adults, they've been traumatized by being in school, of everything being wrong and possibly being bullied and etc. It all gets worse as they get older. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, and it's like the shaming comes into play, and then you really lose your self-esteem in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yourself, you described that you would say that, when there were diagnostics in your time that you would have probably been diagnosed dyslexic. Did you notice that in when you worked in business, was that kind of limiting you, or?
Oh well, there's a story. When I was a software engineer before I went up the promotion tree and became a department manager and a research and development director. And my literacy, I didn't have to do an awful lot of it really. And by that time, we got computers that had got spell check on them and stuff like that, which helped a lot. But I could always, it never stopped me getting my A-levels and getting my degree. But when I got my GCSE, which is what you get when you're 16, in English, I passed my English teacher in the corridor and she said, "How did you get that?" So she was absolutely amazed that I would actually pass English. So it must have been pretty bad. But there is so much that snowballs on top of it. When I was in software engineering, I really didn't have a problem. And funnily enough, in the days when I was a software engineer, we wrote software in machine code. So there was a lot of reading. And I don't know why, but I never had a problem with reading machine code. Don't know. It just made total sense to me. And so that was fine. But and a lot of people do go into computer programming and software engineering now who are dyslexic. I think because one of the things that I could do, which might sound really bizarre, I was writing software for automating a pathology laboratory, which is where your blood, when they take a blood test on you, goes to be tested. And so it was quite complicated. And we used to automate this, and we used to produce reports for the hospitals to tell them what the results were for this patient. and there was lots of complications in it. And one of the things about being dyslexic is you can see things from different perspectives. So I would stand in the middle of the computer room when one of the pieces of software had made a mistake and gone, okay, so who did this? And I could actually have a conversation with the different pieces of software until I worked out which one it was. And then I'd go and check. And yes, sure enough, I found the error and corrected it. So fantastic skill, which I hadn't realized was probably part of my dyslexia. But I'm not sure it actually really benefits you from having a dyslexia diagnosis, I think is one of my problems with it. Because all you're going to do is be told to do the same stuff, but more of it. They're not giving you another strategy for literacy. And you get sort of singled out, taken out of class, all of those things that you don't want to do. And as you were saying, gets you back into shame again.
Yeah. So that's also, kind of the thing, like most of the remedies that are then, that you then get are more of the same, and
yep,
tends to be very strange. And this is often the case, like with all sorts of problems. To solve the problem, we need more of the same thing. And I would say, like, oftentimes it's actually that has created the problem in the first place. I would say, like, this is also true, like, for phenomena like bullying and other problems that you find in schools and in these settings.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And it's really difficult to break the mold, because, as I say, this big paradigm of assessments and ways we teach them is all, I'm sorry to say, but it's all got a lot of money behind it. So people don't want, people will come to me and say, should I take my child for an assessment of dyslexia? And I go, good question. Could you come and bring them to see me first, just for one short session? And I will check whether they're visualizing words, because in 22 years, I have never yet met a dyslexic who is properly visualizing words. So it's pointless taking them for an assessment, because actually, if they're not visualizing words, I can tell you now, they'll be assessed dyslexic, because that's the way the test works. And so what you're better to do is bring them along, get them to start visualizing words, and then see whether you need an assessment. And most of the time you don't. Yeah, it's expensive to change it in schools, because they have invested thousands and millions of pounds in resources for schools to teach phonics. And I'll remind you of, you love self-directed learning. There's a guy called John Holt who published a book about self-directed learning when my son was little, and my son is now 37. And one of the things he said was, there are some children that learn to read without, and Harriet Patterson has said the same, without any instruction at all. They go from 0 to 100% instantly. And my son did that. He hated reading at school. He started to learn to read by his father read the back page of the Guardian newspaper with football results on it. So he did the same thing. He hated the books he was given in school. And he's now a university professor in America. So he started a bit late, but I do worry about the self-directed learning people who are saying, oh, well, they don't need to read until they're ready to read, which might be 12. And I do worry that that's an awfully long time. I didn't learn to read for pleasure until I was 40. And I missed out all the children's storybooks. I never read any of them because I never read for pleasure. I read what I had to read for academic stuff. but that was very limited.
Yeah. Yeah, we were, I guess, like, actually fortunate with that. Like, my daughter could read before you would go to school. So, but actually, yeah, as like, it's like the thing that also, yeah, Harriet and other researchers describe. He couldn't really tell how she learned it. I think it was like the need that we couldn't read as much stories that she actually wanted us to. So she just decided to do it herself.
Yeah.
And I guess like the thing with like learning to read a bit later, I don't know. In my experience, like I have most of my experience is in self-directed education, like getting to know a lot of young people. And yeah, the age where they actually start reading and writing can be quite late, whatever that really means. Oftentimes I feel that they didn't really have a need. But now hearing you and hearing Nikolai talking about it, it could also mean they don't have the information how to do it. Maybe they would like to do it, but they don't have the information. And then, of course, also like in self-directed education, you cannot really protect them completely from outside pressure, because like the general expectation of our society is that you have to read, and this is really important. And it's generally a question that very young children are asked when they are like 6, 7. Oh, can you already read? And it creates kind of a lot of pressure. And I can imagine if you don't have, I would say, like by chance, that you are a learning type that is actually advanced, that makes it easier to read, then you feel like shamed. Yeah, and you feel like, oh, but I'm not good enough. And then you get like these ideas. And then if you then on top of that would be diagnosed as dyslexic or something, and that would just emphasize the fact that you are somehow wrong, that you are different and you cannot do it or whatever. So that could create that. So it's definitely something I will look at differently now, because I have this new information. On the other hand, I guess it is true what Harriet and Alan Thomas and also like Peter Gray and all these researchers found, that in self-directed education, if you are in a self-directed education setting, wherever, if you are at home or in a Sudbury school or at Summerhill or wherever, what they describe is also true. It is not really a problem in that environment.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I mean, I had a little girl, mum actually spoke to me, who was a neighbour of mine, and she said her child was in nursery, which means she's 3 to 4, before she goes into reception class at 4. And she said they've been starting to teach them phonics, and she's really annoyed because they've only taught them really slowly, and she wants to do longer words. She wants to do words with double O in them. And so mum said to the teacher, well, can she do that yet? And the teacher said, no, she's not able to do that yet. And I thought, that's a terrible thing to say to a kid of 3 years old. No, sorry, you can't do that. So I said to her, just show her the words, the whole words. Don't try and break them down into phonemes. Just show her the whole words. Stick them up on the wall of her bedroom. And then she can start recognizing them without having to take them to pieces and put them together again. And the weird thing is that if they start with phonics, they expect them to move on to word recognition. So I'm not teaching anything crazy. You know, that's a measure of their success. All I'm doing is saying, teach them the word recognition first, and then they'll find phonics easier.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like how would you do it in China? They don't have these letters, so they have a picture for a word, exactly. and the same, like when I'm thinking about it, actually that is before we talked, I told you a little bit about how I came about to stop teaching reading music.
Yeah.
And if I think about it, like how this actually works in my mind when I'm reading music, because it doesn't really work. If you take like note by note, that doesn't work. You cannot play fluently.
Yeah.
And you have to. So it's actually very important to see a very big picture.
Yeah.
And then create somehow, and I would say I'm a drummer, so it gets even more complicated. So I do like 4 things at once. And that's also like a misconception, because actually what I'm doing is I create one image of what I'm doing. And this includes my whole body. And I would say like pianists do that too. And because otherwise it would be super complicated. If you had to decipher this, no, I see like this one image and I know this is how it sounds. And this is what my body is supposed to do. I started like, I did some games. We built actually like the music with Legos.
Yeah.
So then we created the visual thing. And I found it really important, like to explain how it works, because there's a logic to that image. It's all mathematics. It's more like it's a mathematical language. Actually, reading music is nothing else than a mathematical language. How about mathematics? Do you find like similar phenomena with that?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I have a maths degree. Only because my literacy was so bad, I decided the only degree I could get was a maths degree. Never used it since the day I left, apart from the fact it taught me a huge amount of logic. And that was very useful to a software engineer. With maths, you have to be able to visualize numbers. And this, again, should be started when children are really young, because the first thing you normally do with children is to throw some dice and say how many spots on the dice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something. So what they need to do is start getting images in their head of dots on dice. And then later on, they can move on to images in their head of numbers. And then they can move on to doing mental arithmetic. So if I say 28 plus 54, then what's that come out as? So again, you're using mental imagery for numbers. And there is so many people who are phobic about maths. And
oh, yes.
I haven't met anybody who is phobic about maths who is actually visualizing pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it works. It's like, to me, it's like playing games.
Yep.
Like playing a board game. It's like you're moving pieces around, and you have all these grids and stuff like that. And I can move numbers then in my mind. I can move them around somehow. And but it's just images, and there are all these matters. I remember that in home education, like one of the inspectors wanted us to teach our daughter like the methods how they teach it in school. And I didn't understand how it works. And this was like to make like very simple calculations. It was like, whoa, this is like a super complicated system. Why do I have to do that?
Yeah. I'd never have got my maths degree without being able to visualize numbers. It would not have been possible, because when you get into doing university maths, it's really complicated and you need to be able to hold all those images together.
And is it maybe also like if you have like really complicated things, for example, for me, it was always very important. I had to know why.
Yeah.
So just the abstract wasn't enough. So I needed a story around it, because otherwise I couldn't really imagine what is this supposed to do.
I spend a lot of time talking to people about why I'm asking them to do something. And I have pictures of their brain, for example, I'll tell you. If I ask you to picture an elephant, you go to the back part of your brain, which is called the occipital lobe, and you find an elephant. Okay, and then you can tell me you can see an elephant, and then you can tell me what it looks like. Okay, and then I might ask you whether it's still or whether it's running around, and can you get control over it? And then, so that's the first bit of brain science. Is the occipital lobe is absolutely vital. Right next to the occipital lobe is where we have words. And they know this from brain science from around the year 2000. And so what I did, which somebody said was a stroke of genius, was on every object, like a lion, I would get the kids to write lion on the side of the lion. So when they thought of the lion, they saw lion written along the side of it. And then by some miracle, the word moved, transposed into the word form area, which is right next to the occipital lobe in the back of your brain. So I did noun words only to start with until kids had got all the way up to elephant or something like that. And then I would teach them how to do non-noun words, which was just another trick, really. The important thing is, I mean, you also get, for example, kids who can read really well and can't spell. That's because they have filled up their word form area, this place at the back of their head, with words for reading. And so when they see a word, they recognize it. They don't have to break it down. But when they come to spell, they go back to phonics. And phonics is not great for spelling. So what you need to do is get them to visualize the word and then write it down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would say that's actually what I'm doing and why my spelling is a bit messy. Yeah. I'm really happy about autocorrect. That's like, whoa, yeah. And if I see it, then I know, oh, this is the right spelling.
Next time you see one of those, put it up as a post-it on your computer screen.
Oh, yeah.
So that you remember it. But it's really easy to teach this. I mean, I literally teach kids in 3 half-hour sessions.
And if you think about it, like the average dyslexic therapy takes like 50 to 60 hours. And most of the time it's horrible. They
have to practice. So you have to give them enough skills that they can actually go away and practice it on their own. But they don't need a tutor, because that's another group of people who are making a fortune, I'm sorry, out of dyslexia. And, you know, I come along and say, I can do this in 3 half-hour sessions roughly. And that's going to put another group of people out of work.
Yeah. And I would actually argue this is true for most stuff we learn. So that's the same that I recognize, like with teaching music. You actually don't need so much tutoring.
Yeah.
If you know some basics and if you are stuck, yeah, then ask for some help. But otherwise, just do it. Just experiment, just play with it. It's more like playing with, also like reading. For me, fortunately, like reading was always fun. Yeah. But I had like, because like spelling was so important in the Luxembourg school system. So I could like write stories and I would read and I could like perform. I could really like, like read aloud, and it's like you actually know what I'm talking about. And but my spelling was so bad that most of the tests I got back were like, yeah, but you don't have enough points to, only because of the spelling. That's unfortunate. Like, but there comes all the judgment thing again. Then you are like shamed, and then you get like this feeling, but I'm bad at this. Especially for foreign languages, it was a huge problem. Yeah. Does it work for you in your experience? Like when you have somebody that, if you want to teach reading and writing foreign languages, is it the same?
Yeah, we teach it in everything. So if for example they're picturing the word dog, right? We get them to picture chien, in a different colour on the same. We normally get them picturing on whiteboards, mini whiteboards in their head, so they don't get confused with what's written on the wall. And so you've got dog and you've got Xi'an above it, and it's exactly the same thing. The only thing is different about it, I mean, we had Welsh, we had an incident with a few years ago. We had a lad who could read Welsh, could speak Welsh, but was unbelievably slow. And what had happened to him was Welsh is a phonetic language. So he was absolutely stuck in phonics. So every word he read, he was decoding and then saying it. So he was actually able to do it. And I said to the girl, she wasn't one of my clients, it was one of somebody else's clients. And I said to her, just teach him to visualize words and the whole thing will speed up. I mean, I had a perfect example of this personally. I used to go to sleep reading after about 2 pages because I was just exhausted, really, and it really wasn't very interesting to me. And once I learned how to do this, I can now read a whole book in a weekend.
Yeah.
Completely different.
I couldn't imagine like reading, if you have to decode everything, it's like really, it takes
Hard
so
work.
much energy. Yeah.
It's also the wrong part of your brain, by the way. It's the front of your brain you're decoding in, and it should be the back of your brain you're visualizing in. So that's why kids get so tired.
And I guess it messes with the understanding of what you are reading.
Yep. And of course, if you've got more fluency and you've got more flow, you're going to understand what you're reading much better.
Yeah. What about like the phenomenon that a word can be like the letters of a word can be at completely the wrong places. Just the first and the last has to be right. What about that?
Sorry, do you mean where the Cambridge University did this?
Yeah, you can like scramble, like, and I can do that. I can also read upside down and from left to right. That doesn't matter. I don't care.
Yes, the first time I looked at that, I went, I don't know what this is. And so then I went, I read the instructions at the top and it said, you will be able to read this. And I went, you will be able to read this, Olive. So I then read it and I read it fluently.
Yeah.
I just took off the judgment about the fact, I was doing judgment about this is all spelt wrong and blah, 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 blah. I think it's to do with the fact you've got a mental image of the word and it doesn't really matter if the middle bit's a bit jumbled up because you'll still be able to read it. But if the normal problem with jumbled up stuff is, which you may have heard of Erlen glasses, which are tinted glasses or tinted overlays, what they're doing is they're relaxing your eyes. And if you get really stressed, there was a piece of research done by Erlen that said if you get really stressed, the letters move even faster on the page. And so I went, okay, so we'll distress the kids and see if they stop. And lo and behold, they did. And so it's all about stress. Those letters moving on the page, all you've got to do is de-stress somebody and they will stop moving. And what's more, they will, I forgot what I was going to say there. I have to come back to that one. I've lost that one, that thought. It's my ADHD.
Yeah, it happens. Sometimes you lose yourself in the conversation. What about grammar and stuff like that?
I don't do grammar because, to be honest, I didn't do grammar at school. I was rubbish at grammar because I was so busy trying to spell words. I think I was asleep in grammar lessons. And so I've written 3 books and I have an editor for each one because my grammar is just not great. And I'm at the age of I am and I can't be bothered to fix this problem. I use spell check and Grammarly. I do like Grammarly, which is a really useful tool to make the sentences it points out to you, for example, when your sentences are too long or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Great tool.
And I would say, like, actually, where comes the idea from that we all have to be that good in everything? Like,
Yeah.
that's why we have editors. They are really good in what they do. You have like people that are super good in spotting, like if there's some mistake in the spelling and they can correct this very, very quickly. Why should I do that? For me, it's a very struggle. Why should you do it? And then nowadays you have like tools like Grammarly and all the autocorrect things. Why shouldn't we use them? And then there comes like the other part, what I find also very interesting. I heard an interview by a language scholar, and he talked a little bit about like the Luxembourgish language, because that's very interesting. Actually, in school we are not taught to write it, and it's
really?
Yeah, and the rules to write Luxembourgish, they are not so old. So it's quite a new phenomenon that you find books in Luxembourgish and that you find Luxembourgish actually written. And he talked a little bit about like the culture of young people, because Luxembourgish is now as much written as never before, because young people use it to communicate in social media by text messages and chatting.
Yeah.
But they don't care about the grammar rules. And he actually said like, yeah, but you have to think about that, because actually that's living language. What we did, like putting down these rules, actually they will change, because if young people now decide that a word will be written like that, but the grammar will change. Or like the spelling rules will change by time. So actually, like, is there really such a thing as this is the only way to write a word?
Yeah, and when you come on to the English homophones, for example, those idiotic words which are spelt differently, different meaning, and they sound the same.
Yeah.
So like where and where, you can't do that phonically. No. You have to have a mental image of that.
Yeah, and you have really to understand what is the context and really understand what is said. And actually, I find this quite amusing, because you can like play with the language. Then you can like, I find this so English is so perfect for that, because you have all these words that sound the same, and it creates a complete art form of comedy.
Yes.
And it's genius. And you have some stuff like that in Luxembourgish too. You can like make sentences like Hunnisch, Hunnisch would mean, do I have honey?
Right.
But it sounds the same. You say like two words, it's the same. It's like, what? And we have actually not a lot of words. So sometimes like people get really frustrated because we use the same words to describe different stuff, but it remains the same word, because the language is not so precise. And German, for example, is extremely precise. And you can play with that too. It makes it also funny. You have a different kind of humor in that. So actually playing with words and be creative about it, and be creative with the spelling of words, creates a lot of very humorous results. So why would we discourage that? Actually, like, oftentimes it comes back to the judging around it, and then like really having ideas, and we always did it like that, so we cannot change.
Well, the worst thing is actually the history in the UK is not like that. It's more like the German version. In the 1980s, I think I'm right, and 1990s, there was to my knowledge, there was 3 pieces of research written that agreed that you had to visualize words in the English language. And there was, and then around 2000, a couple of neuroscientists went, Yes, and that's where the words will be living in your brain, in the word form area. So I thought, oh, absolutely great. And then within 2 years, which is very similar to the German story, within 2 years, they decided to go for phonics only.
Yeah. But it's true for Luxembourg too. And I guess I think it's true for France too. And for a lot of European countries. And as maybe even for America, I don't know.
Yeah, but whereas you've got Spanish, which is a phonetic language, so it doesn't matter so much for that, and Italian, which is. But for English, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that most of the time, like when they analyze statistics, oftentimes you hear like, yeah, but it's the students. They are lazy, or it's the parents, they are not helping. We need more homework. We need help with homework. Like, we need more school.
We need to teach the children in a way that matches their strengths. And until we stop throwing their strengths away, which is what we're doing, these incredibly visual, creative children need to be taught in a way that matches their strengths, without a shadow of doubt. We need all the creative people we can get on the planet. We've got so many difficult situations. We need them to be creative problem solvers or whatever. And if you think of a classroom where you're continuously, this is the opposite to self-directed learning, a typical phonics class where you're continuously told all this complicated stuff about phonemes and how they're meant to fit together and how you're meant to recognize them. And it's just the opposite to self-directed learning.
Yeah, it's very tedious. And I would say like maybe beyond giving parents this information, I guess facilitators in schools, parents have to know this first and then.
Parents won't do this because they'll ask the teacher what they think, and they'll say, that's rubbish.
But what is your experience? Did you try talking to teachers about that? What's your experience with that?
If you get an open-minded teacher, they will be absolutely fine. But they are few and far between. Teachers are also really busy, so they really don't want to take on anything else, despite the fact this is really simple and it will save them an enormous amount of time because the kids will learn quicker. They'll even learn phonics quicker. So they will, it'll be worthwhile spending. I say to people, when you're in reception class, they always, this is the 4 to 5 year olds, they are always sitting them all down on the carpet and reading them a story. And I go, before you read them a story, can you ask one question? Whilst I'm reading the story, can you make up my pictures in your head of what the story is about so I can ask you questions at the end? Right? It takes, 15 seconds, and you'll get them on the route to visualizing stuff. And then you move, once they're getting really good at that, you move them on to visualizing words in their pictures.
And I guess it is not really something where you are manipulating somebody, or it's just like giving them the tools that they need. And it seems to me very natural. I guess at least facilitators in self-directed education schools, like democratic schools, like in these environments, I would guess they are open to that information. But like to me, this is it's like I talked to Nikolai, now talking to you. This is new information for me. I'm really excited about this because I guess this is really something to explore further. And maybe it would be interesting if this information gets more known in democratic schools or in other learning environments. What the experiences would be if you would see in self-directed education that maybe young people would start a bit earlier because it gets easier and other people don't have to struggle so much.
And they can, I've got a 16-month-old granddaughter, and I made up some cards the other day for her, which and I just laminated them on little little cards, and I just put a picture in each one and wrote across the picture what it was. So she had one that was a cat and one that was a pencil and one that was, I put some colours in there and I wrote green across one of those. So, and she's got this little pack of cards that she can just sit there and play with. I don't expect her. I'm not asking her, what's that say? I'm just hoping she's going to start absorbing words, because every time she sees a duck, she'll think of duck written along the front of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure when the moment comes, because like young people are very good telling you that they are interested.
Yeah.
They don't need any complicated explanation of phonics and stuff like that. That's not really what they are interested in.
Somebody said to me the other day, if you want to ride a bicycle, do you want to know how all the gears work and how the tires go round and how the roads in the tires, etc., or do you just want to get on it and give it a try?
Exactly. You just do it. It's like playing the drums. Everybody's always telling everybody that this is very complicated. I would say, no, it's not at all. It's very easy. Every 3 to 4 year old can do it. And in my experience, they can. It took me never more than 1 hour of music lessons to get them to play a song.
Right.
It's very easy. But just like, you just giving them some basic tools and then they can figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, but I think to not tell kids that the way to get good at literacy is to see words, I think that is bad as far as I'm concerned, because I think everybody should know. I mean, it took me until I was 50 to learn that skill. And I go, why doesn't somebody tell me, for God's sake? So that's where I'm at with it. But yes, I think I ought to be. Now I'm really back to the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and home education. I think I ought to be back in that community rather than trying to. I mean, going into school was just really too much hard work and lack of interest. And I mean, the funny thing was, a teacher introduced me to somebody the other day at something social, and she said, "Oh, Olive's the person that helps teach children who can't learn the way we're teaching." And I went, "No, actually, everybody could learn like this.
Yeah.
And you need to learn. It's who's got the learning difficulties? Some people say." So there we go.
It's kind of upside down.
Yep, absolutely.
Olive, thank you so much for this information, and I hope we will reach some people and at least open a discussion around this and make people curious about exploring this further. I will link your contact in the show notes and everything. Anything else you want to add, maybe?
If you put visualkids.co.uk in there as well, I've got a learning platform where there's a lot of stuff you can get for free if you go on to visualkids.co.uk. And I'm doing weekly classes on mental imagery, dyslexia and ADHD. And you can just come along for those for free. You can come along. And there is some other stuff as well there that you can have a look at. So, and there is the scaffolding project for the little tinies. And I think you would be really interested in that. Do sign up for that. And it's a video plus 2 or 3 documents. And what we're trying to do is make it easy for schools. But I must admit, I'm more encouraged in the last few weeks to get back into self-directed learning. But I just have this nagging thing that I don't want to leave them until they're 12. I want to tell them so what Nicolai said. I want to tell them I want to get them to work out how people who are good at something do it. And then it's up to them whether they want to do that.
And I think this is a great message. In that sense, what about self-directed education? Thank you, Olive.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye.
Dieser Podcast ist möglich dank Zuhörern wie dir. Wenn du einen einfachen Weg suchst, meine Arbeit zu unterstützen, abonniere meinen Podcast doch bei Spotify, Apple, Google oder bei meinem Telegram-Kanal What About SDE. Ein Review oder Teilen mit Freunden hilft auch sehr dabei, dass mehr Menschen den Podcast finden können. Ich freue mich auch über jede finanzielle Unterstützung, entweder mit einer einmaligen Spende oder mit deiner monatlichen Unterstützung auf Patreon. Mit dieser unterstützt du nicht nur meine Arbeit mit dem Podcast, sondern auch alle anderen Projekte in Bezug auf selbstbestimmte Bildung, wo ich mich engagiere. Alle Links findest du in der Beschreibung. Bis zum nächsten Mal bei Wie wäre es mit selbstbestimmter Bildung?